everyone, and welcome back to Potomac Station Coffee House. I'm Valerie, that's David, and this is our Gen X Pittsburgh podcast. Tonight we have Marco Cardamone, entrepreneur of so many cool things. We're going to get caught up with him and see what he's up to these days. Stick around, we'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to GXP. What's up?
My background is radio, and Marco's going to talk about his background in radio.
I know.
Right?
I'm excited to talk to him because of Café Allego. It was one of my favorite places to eat back in the day. It comes up in conversation all the time with my family. My brother used to work there, and the pate was amazing. So maybe I can score that recipe off him if he's still with it.
I'm excited to talk about Sinead O'Connor.
So am
Whenever I mention
I know.
Marco and Café Allego, everybody wants to talk about the Sinead O'Connor.
I know. And I have a Sinead O'Connor incident that happened too. I was doing her makeup one time, and can I say? I mean,
She's dead.
I know, but
so you can say whatever you want. No one's going to sue you or me. So feel free.
Okay, Sinead O'Connor farted in my makeup chair one day on the Jon Stewart show. There we have it.
I don't know where that rates in terms of ripping up a picture of the Pope on Saturday Night Live,
Yeah,
farting
well.
in a chair with Valerie. I don't know where we are, right? But I don't think anybody's going to do that.
I hope not. Anyway, she was adorable and so sweet, and she was really cool.
All right, well, I think we should take a break.
We need to take a break.
Yeah,
We need
that's
to
right.
regroup
Probably.
here before we bring out
Exactly.
Marco.
Yes.
All right, guys, we'll be right back with Marco Cardamone. When I need a coffee that actually shows up and a suite that understands commitment, I head out to Potomac Station Coffee. Everything's made in-house, always fresh, and yes, that cinnamon roll, you're eating the whole thing. And the ever-changing latte menu is legendary. Check out Potomac Station Coffee House next to the tracks in Dormont.
Welcome back to Gen X Pittsburgh. I'm Dave, that's Valerie, and we are here with Marco Cardamone, and I'm looking forward to really hearing some interesting stories that I don't think other people have had your perspective on some of these things, especially in the digital arts, right? That it's just unique to Pittsburgh. So I'd love to first, though, talk about your background. Can you talk a little bit about growing up, about your dad? Your dad, somebody special?
No,
right?
I cannot. I will not. No. So yeah, I guess I was born in Pittsburgh, and I went to school here for all the early years. I left when I was 18, graduated from high school, went to Boston University, studied film and broadcasting for 4 years, lived in Boston, and then moved from Boston to New York City and lived there for 10 years, and then boomeranged back to Pittsburgh in 1986 and been here ever since.
And your dad?
My dad had an advertising agency called MARC Advertising, which was one of the larger advertising firms in Pittsburgh. I never really worked there, but later when I came back to Pittsburgh, we did some kind of work together. But growing up, I did work there. I was a messenger boy when I was in high school, and that was kind of fun because you got to go out and see all of the subcontractors that worked for the agency. So all of the photographers, and I'd pick up photos and deliver them back, and so messengers got to see the external world. And then the next year I worked at the agency, and I worked in the mailroom, and I got to read everybody's mail, so I kind of got the inside poop on what was going on.
Yeah, wow.
So that was my advertising agency experience early on.
Yeah, I mean, you were a little modest. MARC Advertising was the biggest agency, at least as far as I can remember. Back in the day, Heinz was one of their big clients, right? I think. And
Not Heinz.
Okay.
No, I don't think it was
who
Heinz.
do I know?
Yeah, you're going to put me on the spot trying to get their top. They did work for Arby's. They put McDonald's on the map when McDonald's was a local franchise. They kind of introduced the Big Mac back in the '60s. I don't know. They had some pretty big clients back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so once you were in Boston, I know that you have a kind of interesting story about computers and graphic design sort of the early days of this, right?
Yeah. So, let's go back. I graduated high school in 73, so I'm 100 years old. I went to Boston, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I, played around with film in high school. My friend Brady Lewis, who's a Pittsburgh sort of well-known filmmaker, we used to make films in high school. So I was thinking like, I maybe should study film, but I didn't. I went to Northeastern University, and I wasn't sure what to do, and I was studying philosophy and psychology, and I kind of just dropped out after the first quarter because I just wasn't really excited by what I was doing. But then I read that you could actually study film and broadcasting and communications over another college called Boston University. So I transferred. I worked a summer, just kind of getting ready for that. And then, my second year was all in Boston University. So I studied film and broadcasting, but I was really interested in animation. And there wasn't a lot of that going on at the time. And I remember stumbling around Boston, probably really stumbling, and I saw a sign on a telephone pole that said, Professor so-and-so is going to teach a course at Harvard on how computers can draw. And I thought, like, what's that about? That sounds pretty weird. So I actually went to that lecture at Harvard University, and it was probably 74, and this little professor stood up at the room, and he was basically showing you how computers could not only process numbers, but they could take numbers and numerical information and draw pictures with them. So he projected a picture of a cube, and he was like, see what computers can do? And I was like, oh my God. And the only way back then that you could actually output that was on like a pen matrix printer, would move a pen around and it would draw the cube for you. But it sort of thrust me into this world of early computer graphics, and a lot of other stuff happened after that. But that was the sort of a pivotal turning point for me, and it was it was pretty crazy moment. It was really early in the cycle of computers starting to come out of the closet, as it were, and be used more for visualization.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people, many people, I should say, of this generation and younger, up to a certain age, probably don't even understand that when you're talking, we are in a world where there were no personal computers.
That's right.
There was no dot matrix printers. This was really, this was almost in the time of punch cards.
That's right. Yeah, so just briefly, the history of computers, IBM, the 50s, the 60s, big machines, corporate clients, nobody ever got to see these things. They were, as we got into the late 70s, they started moving into what are called mini computers, and they started, becoming more prevalent in smaller types of businesses, not just big corporations that could have IBMs, but smaller types of businesses could get into mini computers. And that's kind of the era that I was exposed to computer graphics. I went back after watching that seminar, as it were, at Harvard University, and I sought out the engineering school at Boston University, and I found a professor who had a mini computer, and he was doing primitive graphics, and I did a cross thing with him from the communications school, and I said, I really want to be part of this. And he goes, oh, we only have engineers here, but you seem crazy, so we're going to let you in. So that was that era. But then, as you say, David, the industry kept evolving, and we get into sort of the mid 80s, and the birth of Apple Computer, and they're really in the late 70s, but they really kind of came on the screen, and that started the era of the personal computer, and the rest is kind of history. In many ways, it kept evolving to the phone and the mobile device and all of that stuff. That's sort of the three big trajectories of the computer graphic era, or computer.
And didn't you rub shoulders with some of the people who have went on to create sort of Adobe and maybe, I forget the name of the other program, was it Paintbrush or something that was sort of,
yeah.
Was that right?
Yeah, I did. I guess when I left, Valerie, you haven't asked any questions here.
I'm just very intrigued.
I talk so much.
That's okay. The trajectory that I got on as I was leaving Boston and graduating college, I went to New York City. There was a place in New York City called the New York Institute of Technology. It was a research lab. It was the first commercial computer graphic facility. And yes, the people that started that lab, the people I met in 1976 were Ed Catmull. Ed Catmull has been the president of Pixar since Pixar was developed. Alvy Ray Smith, who was one of the founders and also authors of Photoshop. So all the early pioneers that were working in computer graphics, all the, the heavy software developers, I had an opportunity to meet and work with way back when.
And so before Valerie gets to ask all the fun questions about Pittsburgh, I have one more serious question, and that is that you did what I believe is the very first digital billboard at Three River Stadium. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, actually. I don't know if it's the very first, but it was one
Let's
of
say
the
it was.
first.
Sounds good.
Let's say it was. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. No one's going to fact check this anyway. So graduating college, I had some exposure with one of the people I worked with as a freelance artist. He worked at a place called the Center for Advanced Visual Studies. His name was Ron Hayes. Ron was a early pioneer in computer graphics, and he was working with computer graphics, and I worked for him for a while as part of my independent study in my last year of college. And he exposed me, he got a gig from the All Lutheran Youth Adult Church group to go down to the New Orleans Superdome, which had just been built, and they were having like 30,000 youth kids come in for the church, and he was in charge of programming the whole event. And they had these little billboards that were electronic, and they were the first electronic billboards in the country because it was a new stadium. And Ron Hayes, the producer, not only did the whole show, but he kind of put me in charge of doing the graphics on the billboards, which were really a strange aspect ratio. They were like real long and narrow, and there were a couple strips of them. So they weren't like these big billboards you see. So I came back from that experience. I had to leave New Orleans because I had this incredible toothache, and it turned into be this like root canal thing that I needed. So I had to fly back to Pittsburgh to a dentist that I had. And when I was in Pittsburgh, Three River Stadium had really just put up this first digital billboard, and they were promoting it, and there were only 3 advertisers that were on it. It was Mellon Bank, and it was Gulf Oil, and it was, I forget the third one. What was it? US Steel. That's what it was. And I called US Steel and I said, hey, I want to do a computer graphic animation for your billboard, and they didn't answer the phone. And then I called Gulf Oil, and they said the same thing. They didn't really answer the phone. And I, went to Mellon Bank, and I ran into an ad manager, and he said, well, yeah, we could use maybe some new ideas for your graphics. What do you have in mind? And one thing led to another, and I did my first 30-second spot, as I was healing up from my root canal for Mellon Bank way back in 77, maybe 78.
And that was sort of, so now you're starting to meld the worlds between your father's business and what you're doing, and maybe a little bit of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it was my first entrepreneurial thing for sure. I think it was a $5,000 job. I was like out of my mind. I couldn't believe it. And I do remember my dad gave me some coaching, and he said, when I went in to pitch, my idea, the guy said, yeah, go off and tell me what you think you want to do. And I went off and spent the whole night, drawing up some stuff, and here's what we're going to do. And what they wanted to do was promote their new 24-hour banking. So they came out with these machines that you could bank on, and no one knew what those machines were. So he said, so my whole concept was how to tell the people in the stadium, hey, Mellon Bank has 24-hour banking, and here's what it is. And no matter what time it is or where you are, you can go do some banking. So that was the creative nature of the spot. But my dad coached me, like when I went in to present the storyboard to the ad manager to see if he would actually buy it and give me the project. He said, if he seems interested, ask him for an advance. And I said, what's that? And he said, it means, he has to give you some money against the project before you start it. And I said, oh, okay. So I made the presentation, and the guy said, well, that's great. I think we can do this. And he asked me how much it would cost, and I said $5,000. And said, well, I'll have to think about that, but I think we can make that work. And then as the meeting came to an end, I said, but I'll need an advance. And he looked at me like, the hell are you talking about? And he went out and got a petty cash, and I asked for $1,000. He gave me $500. He came back with $500. So I was like out of my mind. I'm like, wow. So it wasn't very much a first entrepreneurial thing, but I was coached.
So how did that lead into Café Allego? What happened there?
Well, so I was still living in New York City. So I went and did from Boston, 77, moved to New York. It was in the mid 80s. So all of that happened in the late 70s. So I was building my career in computer graphics in the city of New York. And Café Allego didn't start until 1986. And the seed for that was, my dad calling up, and he kept trying to recruit me back to Pittsburgh. He's like, hey, why don't you come back to Pittsburgh? We could do some stuff together. It's like, Dad, I'm never coming back to Pittsburgh. Like, I'm not going to do it. And I left Pittsburgh, right? And yet one thing led to another thing. And, I got fired from my job in New York, and, was, wondering with my wife-to-be, what are we going to do? And she's there, well, why don't we go to Pittsburgh? You got some family there. I'm like, I'm not going to Pittsburgh. Paula, we're not going to go back to Pittsburgh, damn it. But as it were, Paula and my dad prevailed. So we came back to Pittsburgh, and it was during that early formative stage, like I didn't know really what I was going to do, and I was really feeling like, why am I here? What am I going to do? We had a family meeting that my dad called, and he said, let's do some entrepreneurial things. We've always wanted to do a restaurant. It's like, who? And he said, well, your brother-in-law's a chef, and your mother's a great cook, and I've always wanted to do a restaurant. I go, well, that's you guys. But anyway, we hatched this idea. My brother, my sisters, Gina, Antoinette, my brother Dino, Gina's wife, Red, who was the chef, he was the main talent. Dad said, look, I'll give you a little bit of seed capital. Why don't you guys go try to find a building? Why don't you look for, what kind of cuisine does not exist in the marketplace, and let's see what we can do. And at the same time they did that, I said, I'm not going to do that. I want to do a computer graphic thing, and I did. But we ran parallel. So I started another company that worked for him and his agency. It was this offshoot of his agency, and that's kind of how the restaurant got born. And Red, the chef, went out and found a building with my sister Antoinette on the south side, and next thing I know, we were like, making a menu and rolling in business, So.
Yeah, no, that was one of my favorite restaurants. And Antoinette, you walked in there, Valerie. She was the she was to me. She was the heart and soul, because every time I was like 21, going to Café Allego, to have wine and pate and some, it was kind of on a place for somebody young like that to go in there.
Absolutely.
But my first time there, excuse me, was with Philip Lucy.
Oh yeah, Philip was a great friend and guest.
Yes. He actually gave me my first start as a hair and makeup artist. Oh. So I got to know him really well. And
excellent.
After a big shoot one night, he took us all there, and I was like, oh my God, I'm fascinated with this place.
Oh, that's a great story.
Continued to go there for, dates, and then, with my, for like husbands and that kind of stuff. So it was a very special place to me. And I'm not kidding about that pate recipe.
We'll catch up and I'll give it to you afterwards. Did you say husbands?
Well, no, my first husband. And I would go there.
Get on the record.
My second one, my current one, it's close. So
we've heard that story so many times. People met there, and they kind of proposed to one another there, and then
yeah.
We've heard that story.
And there is a good story with two celebrities at Café Allego that I think we should kind of talk about, because it's we kind of mentioned Sinead O'Connor a little bit ago. Can you just take us through that whole experience there? Because that was crazy, and I think a lot of people...
Before you... I want to set the scene a little bit. Just
sure, please do.
Of how I'm
I'm sure you could do it better than I can.
I don't think that's right, but I want to talk about how I was going to Point Park at the time, and my friend Jeff worked for you at Café Allego.
Jeff Ward.
Yes, Jeff Ward. And he came in, and there was this cafe at Point Park everybody used to sit in the morning, and Jeff came in, and he was like, had this look on his face. You just knew something happened, right? He was like, I have to tell you about what happened last night. And we're like, okay. And he's like, Sinead O'Connor, it was during the WOMAD festival that Peter Gabriel had, right? World Music Festival. He was dating Sinead O'Connor at the time, and they had stopped at Café Allego. And take it from there, because Jeff's story... was enough, but you were there. You're the man.
I was there,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah.
And I don't know, maybe you were there too. Sean, were you there then? Okay, so, it was, mid-90s, early 90s. And yes, indeed, they were in town. They were performing somewhere. Maybe it was the Civic Arena. I can't remember. It must have been the Civic Arena. and they came to Café Allego, and it was an entourage of maybe 3 or 4 people, Sinead and Peter Gabriel, and their bass player is one of the greatest bass players on the planet, Tony Levin. And they were all upstairs, and they were, upstairs was a little bit more private, so they had their own thing. I don't think they were the only ones up there, but they might have been, and they, were doing well. And at one point, I guess Sinead came downstairs, and she was kind of wasted, and they had had a little bit of a fight between her and Peter. I guess they were dating, as you say, and something went sideways, and she came downstairs, and my sister Antoinette was like, "Oh, come on, girl, let's sit at the bar and have a drink." And the next thing, we're all kind of watching those two at the bar kind of like chatted out. And then I remember going upstairs to try to check in on things to see what was going on, and Peter was coming down the steps, and he said, "Have you seen Sinead?" He's like, "Yeah, she's downstairs." He goes, "Oh, okay, good." So that was that. And the next thing I knew, my sister said, "I'm going to take Sinead over to the hotel. She's got to go back." And I said, "Okay, great." So she drove her back to the hotel. Little did I know, my wife and I at the time were writing some music, and we had a cassette, and we had one of our songs in the cassette. And, we were real excited about it. My sister gave the cassette to Sinead and said, "I really want you to listen to this. My brother and his wife wrote this song." She's like, "Oh God," she practically threw up on her or something. Like, "Yeah, sure, I'll listen to it." So Antoinette came back to the restaurant, and she told me, like, "I gave her your cassette." I'm like, "Oh, you just don't do that with
I love it.
And the next thing we knew was the next day we were reading the paper, and Sinead O'Connor like tore up her room and like set the place on fire practically. It was like she totally trashed the room, and it was just a real like, Sinead O'Connor, practically sets the hotel room on fire. And that's the story.
But didn't she also, from what I understand, from what we've been told, she ordered a drink for the express purpose of throwing in Peter Gabriel's face during the argument.
That is true. That's the part I forgot. Sorry. Yeah. Well, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
And that was like, indeed that happened. And that was like, he was pretty cool with it, actually, as I understand. He just like brushed it off and left. But she was pretty violent.
Yeah.
Actually, just worked up. Emotional.
Sure.
She was much cuter at MTV.
I only know that story is true because, Valerie knows everybody in the city. I know nobody. And we were at an art gallery, and she introduced me to somebody, and we were talking. I don't know how we got on the subject, but he said, "Oh, yeah, no, that's a true story, because I was the one that handed Peter Gabriel the towel." So one of your former employees who we met at an art gallery. Do you remember?
It was Rick Box opening, wasn't it?
It must have been, yeah.
Oh my
Could have
God.
That feels right, yes.
It could have been
Yeah.
Rick, actually.
Yeah.
He worked there for a brief.
Oh, did he
I
really?
think so, for a brief time, maybe not.
Did he really? Rick Bach? Rick Bach, did you work at Café Allego?
Rick's going to be on in a few weeks.
Yeah.
He can
Probably
tell
not.
us.
We'll ask him that question for
absolutely
sure.
not. I
Yeah.
never ever. That'd be the last one.
Well, we're going to take a quick sponsor break, and we will be right back. Stick around, everybody. Where do Pittsburghers go to make a good night even better? Con Alma in downtown Pittsburgh, where the lights stay low, the jazz speaks for itself, and the kitchen is on point. Come early and stay late, and let the night do the rest. That's Con Alma, downtown Pittsburgh. Welcome back to Gen X Pittsburgh. Marco Cardamone, Club Cafe. Wow.
Wow.
Not just a place to go see bands, but you had a recording studio upstairs as well.
We did.
Yeah, and you had Nora Jones, you had The Fix, you had John Mayer, you had some big names there before they were like really into their own.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was a kind of interesting story. It came from Café Allego. My wife and I were there one night, and we were having dinner, and we were looking across the street, and the neon sign was out, and the place had been shuttered for quite some time. It had been a music venue prior to that. It was a father-son team, Bobby Cardillo and his dad,
Yep.
and Harry, and they did dueling piano, so it had a music background, and prior to that it was a sort of a shot and a beer place all the way back to the 40s, so it had a nice colorful history, but it was dark when we saw it in, late 1999, and we just said, hey, wouldn't it be fun to go fire that place up and make a music venue? And that was probably the worst thing we could do. But we did it. Now, it was, we and a lot of other people that helped us, some of them are in the room here tonight, and, it was a sort of a passion for us because we loved music. And what we really loved was small, intimate nightclubs where, some of the best shows we had ever seen in our lives were not in stadiums, but they were in these small little intimate rooms, and that's what we wanted to recreate there. And because I was also in the media business, we felt like we should capture that magic because it happens once and then you never see it again. And so we designed the whole place, we gutted it, and we set up a sort of video and audio capture environment. My partners, Barney, the audio producer, and Clay Kisker, Barney Lee, and others sort of built this environment that was where the technology was totally in the background. The artists on stage didn't know it was really there and it wasn't happening, so they weren't conscious of cameras and that sort of thing. There weren't people running around. They just got on this small stage and they saw a bunch of people in the room and they did their thing, and that's really where the magic kind of happens. And if you're lucky enough to have the capturing device, then you can actually preserve that and share it with other people. And that's what we did. And we did it for 5 years, and it was a grind, but we got some great stuff.
And I'm sorry, David, and from that you had a television show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. So we started that in 1999, and we recorded for about 5 years, and that culminated in a television show with KDKA for, a 12-part, 30-minute episode called Live at Club Cafe, The Next Stage in Music, and we aired it there, and then we also aired it. Comcast was a cable sponsor. They were just starting to roll out their video on demand in the early 2000s, and so we had a channel on the Comcast cable on demand service, and we put the main show on at 11 o'clock on Saturday nights, and then outtakes from the show, like behind the scenes, extended interviews, that sort of thing on the Comcast channel. So, but we have 200 shows that are now, however, what is it, 25 years ago? Yeah. And there's some amazing shows.
Wow, I bet.
So we're trying to think about how to re-release them.
Yeah, so I remember, and maybe this is oversized in my head, but I was interning for a jazz station, actually for a syndicated jazz show. And I used to go to Club Cafe and see a lot of Pittsburgh artists. They didn't have many other places to play at the time, jazz. Right. And there was Kenny Blake and Jimmy Ponder, and there was like a little scene that seemed to develop around there. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I would say our initial booking agent was one of the waiters at Café Allego and was really into jazz. Jay Covell is his name. And Jay and Sean Enright, who's sitting in the room here, were kind of, partnering up as, two of the early people that helped us program some of the early shows in the club. And jazz was a real focus. Jazz was really tough, though, because, it was hard for people to come out for jazz. So, it was always, it was just a tougher gig. A lot of the gigs were tough, just to get an audience. You see some of the best shows with two people in the room. You'd mentioned John Mayer. It was like February 6th, 2001. He had just broken out. It was freezing outside. He was an opening act for Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket, and Glenn called up and said, "I'm puking in my room. I've got a flu. John, you're going to have to take the whole show." And there were like 6 people in the club. And John Mayer did this incredible show. We were just sitting there getting drunk. And we said, "Oh, let's go upstairs and flip on the cameras." And we did. And we had like an hour and a half of John Mayer tearing it up.
Wow.
But, in terms of like how hard it was to build a crowd and make a business out of that model, you needed people to show up and pay for tickets and buy drinks and eat, food and stuff like that. But, we learned it over the long haul, how to kind of make it happen.
Glenn Phillips must have been very sick, because I used to work for a audio distribution company. And so we were in LA on a business trip, and he was driving from San Francisco to LA and had been stuck in traffic. He was supposed to play at like 6, and he called. Again, this is days before cell phones, right? So he pulled over on a payphone and called the company. He was like, I'm going to be there.
Right.
Don't let people leave. It's just going to take me a while. And it was 11 o'clock. We showed up, came to the pool, played for all 50 of us, and then stayed all night,
Wow.
signing autographs
Wow.
and talk. Yeah.
That's cool. He must have been sick.
Yeah.
So your time at Allegro and Club Cafe, this is when technology is changing and growing like crazy.
Yeah.
Did you keep up on everything? How did you
Well,
go
we
on
were
to your
a
next?
little ahead on the Allegro, on the Club Cafe thing, because our idea was to not just capture this stuff, but to stream it live to the world. So it's like small club, global distribution. But the technology wasn't able to stream. It was 2000, 2001, 2002, and 3. So streaming wasn't really happening then, and multimedia on the web, broadband wasn't really there. So, we were just kind of stuck in a capture mode and hoping at one point that would catch up and we'd be able to become a digitally wired, watch it now kind of club like you can do now. Now it would work, but that's 25 years later.
Yeah.
So it was a little premature in a way, but there was lots of stuff changing and it was moving quickly, but timing is sort of everything in business. So it was, we were a little early on that one.
Yeah.
But because of your Pittsburgh roots and because of your involvement with media and sort of an early entrepreneur, you were able to sort of shift into, not exclusively obviously, but working on a lot of not-for-profit boards and making some important decisions to help a lot of Pittsburgh institutions, right? Like I know you were on the board of YEP.
Yeah.
And especially when DUQ was leaving Duquesne University, right?
Yeah, so there was another phase of my life where I, went to do some public service stuff, and I just got, asked to be on a certain board, this or that. Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, which was a group I really cared about, and then WYP, so I served on that board. The Green Building Alliance, these are institutions that I, nonprofits that I kind of dug their mission and what they were all about, but especially YEP. And YEP was, this scrappy little, independent radio station that had been around since the 70s, but they were really kind of, a solid audience, solid kind of positioning in the market. But the big public radio station in the market was WDUQ, which was tied to Duquesne University, excuse me, and had been for forever. And while I was on the board of WYEP, Duquesne University sort of made the decision that they no longer wanted to have WDUQ under their umbrella. And so an opportunity arose, and, WYEP was the least likely group in terms of having the cachet or the cash or the wherewithal to really, step up and say, hey, we could help out. Other bigger players, like QED and some of the other players in town, even the management team of WDUQ all wanted to sort of do their own thing, but it wasn't really working. And WYP had a vision and the board had a vision, and we said we could take this radio station and we could bring the first 24-hour news and information service, NPR news and information service, to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was only one of 50 markets, one of 2 markets out of the top 50 markets that did not yet have a 24-hour NPR news and information station. So that really became our focus. We loved jazz, but it wasn't a sustainable business model. So we could do jazz, but that wasn't really what our vision was for DUQ. So we ended up, convincing the foundations. They liked the idea. They helped us raise, $6 million, and we went and acquired the station from Duquesne University. We brought it into this new building that we had built on the south side for WYP that had excess capacity to host and house other radio professionals, and that was sort of the launch of WESA, which really has been a great success story and a great asset to the city of Pittsburgh, I think.
Yeah, I was working at KQV at the time, which was 24-hour all news back then. And I remember when talk first started circulating that the Duquesne was getting rid of the station, I kept trying to convince everyone in KQV we need to buy the station, right? Because in addition to the jazz, they were doing long-form news programming different
Yes.
from KQV.
Yes.
That was doing half-hour format, right? Like CNN, but nobody.
I was going to say, did anybody even think?
A couple of people thought, hey, it's a great idea. I think at the time PJ Maloney liked the idea, and a few of us that were sort of working in it, but the management was like, get the hell out of here. We're not doing this. So,
And the reason is because it was public radio.
Right.
There's a distinction between public and
Yeah,
commercial,
that's right.
so there would be no profit motive,
Right.
and there is no profit motive in public radio.
right. But your signal was really, really good, right?
Absolutely.
And KQV, which
Still
was
is.
the first radio station in the country, not the first commercial station, but the first station, had probably the worst signal in the country, right?
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, 1410 AM is was
Not so good. Yeah.
It's horrible. I mean, if you go into the bathroom, you lose
Yeah.
the signal, right? And so, and the fact that KQV was a lot like Pittsburgh in that it was a small station, but it always punched above its weight,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think when I left KQV, don't quote me on this, but it was billing $1 million a year, which for a signal that
Absolutely.
couldn't get outside of downtown at times, that was an amazing amount of money for.
Yeah.
Right, for
Well, it had a great audience. I mean,
It did.
It really did.
Right.
It was like the station for
Right.
for news.
right, but that was Pittsburgh, right? I mean, Pittsburgh had these. It was a media hub. It was a technology hub. And that's what's so fascinating to me about you. And that's why I was so adamant to get you on in these early, because I think that you're sort of right in the middle of what was happening in the 80s and the 90s here in Pittsburgh, 90s especially, to really move beyond the steel mills and the the coal industry and everything else to what Pittsburgh is today. I mean, I don't know if you get the credit you deserve.
Well, I mean, it takes so many people to do all of what you just described, but again, timing was critical. When I said that I left when I was 18 years old to go to school in Boston, I meant I left. I had no looking back. So 1973, Pittsburgh was kind of dark. It was at the point where the mills were closing, the dislocation, it had not really figured out its future, and I wasn't certainly going to stick around and try to figure out my future in that environment. But coming back, in mid-'80s, it started to turn a little bit, and we rooted ourselves in the South Side with the restaurant in Bedford Square. Plus, I was down in the terminal buildings, which was at the other end of the South Side, and the South Side had been designated a historic district by the Pittsburgh History and Landmarks and by a National Historic Preservation Society, so they didn't tear down all of the great buildings on the South Side. So at the time we came in, or I came back, it was starting to turn. So you start a restaurant, you start other kinds of clubs and businesses, and you sort of ride a curve there. So you're making little changes, but it's all this other stuff that's coming together too at the same time that's really creating this big, massive sort of change.
Can you talk to us about Awesome Pittsburgh?
Awesome Pittsburgh. Yeah, I wish I could give you the quick little elevator pitch like they do. They're so eloquent with it. So Awesome Pittsburgh is a nonprofit organization. They give out monthly grants of $1,000 to people that submit proposals for awesome ideas. That's the only criteria. And they have a group of trustees who give, $100 a month. They have 10 trustees, so they come up with $1,000 every month. And those trustees get to, review these awesome ideas and say we like that one and give the recipient $1,000. And I've been with them for 10 years or so. I don't vote anymore because it's a lot of work to actually review all of that stuff every month. So I do mostly the billing work for them and make sure all the trustees are billed at the right point and that the recipients, the award winners, get their money. But I check out all these projects and they're just cool.
Yeah.
And their only criteria is that it has to be awesome to them. And they've done a great job with that. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I know that my wife is involved with Dormont Arts, and they received one of the grants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Great.
she loves Awesome Pittsburgh.
How long ago was that?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, I don't remember that recently, but, definitely for sure.
Yeah. Do you know Amy Klein? Does that name sound
Yeah.
familiar? Because she was.
Maybe that's, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was Dormont Arts. I mean, it could have been. She did the parking chair.
Yes.
Yeah, and so maybe that's what.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
the project.
Right.
That
Right.
That was
And I should say that my wife's working a documentary about that. So maybe
cool.
that's the connection.
Okay.
That in my head I screwed up.
Yeah.
Which isn't surprising if you know me at all.
So what is Marco Cardamone doing these days?
Oh goodness. Well, I'm retired, so I'm not really doing commercial work. I still have a company called Merging Media, but we're just doing our own sort of projects, some pro bono work, but mostly our own stuff. And I'll tell you, my wife and I mentioned before, we're musicians. We've written a lot of songs. I got to this point where it's like it's now or never. So I'm just collecting all of the stuff we did, and we're still writing stuff and still recording, but it's time to get it out there. So Thursday of this week, I'm launching on Substack our little band project. We have a virtual band sort of thing. So that's
What's the name?
Yeah, it's called Three Musicians.
Are there three of you?
Yeah, there's a third. There's a third one. Yeah, up in New York.
I love it.
His name is Steve Perillo.
All right.
He has a company called Perillo Tours, which is a
Oh yeah, I know that Perillo Tours.
a very large Italian travel agency.
Yep.
So Steve's my college buddy. We're all friends, and we've been writing and recording music since the '80s. We got a body of work, and we're just it's like, hey, before we die, let's get this crap out there.
Yeah.
So how do you describe it? Is it acoustic? Is it
Retro pop rock.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's how I describe it.
I love it. I can't wait to hear. Until then, we're going to play a game with you.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
David and I are going to ask you questions, and it's very simple. All you have to do is answer it.
Okay. This was. They didn't tell me about this part. Thanks, guys.
All right, first question. Iron City or Rolling Rock?
Probably neither, but Rolling Rock.
I think we know the answer to this one, but Three Rivers or Heinz Field?
Three Rivers.
Favorite alternative band?
Clarks, would they be considered alternative?
If you say so.
Yeah.
Well, in my generation, I guess, but maybe not. Maybe not the Clarks. The Affordable Floors.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are they still together?
No.
Oh.
I mean, they do an occasional show.
Yeah.
I think like once a year, he said.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that
Yeah.
episode out.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you're next.
Turner's or Schneider's team?
Schneider's.
Favorite 90s movie?
Oh, now you're going to get me. The last movie I saw was in a theater was Toy Story, and that was in the 90s, wasn't it? So I'll go with
Let's say yes.
Toy Story.
Okay,
And that's
awesome.
digital animation, so
Yeah,
right back,
right
right?
up
Yeah,
your alley.
I don't go to movies.
Okay. Donzi's and Chauncey's or Metropole and Rosebud?
Definitely Rosebud.
Yeah,
Metro,
yeah.
Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Was that Bruce Willis?
Yeah.
Is it a Christmas movie?
Yeah.
I don't know because
To you, it's- You've never seen Die Hard?
No.
It's okay, I say no.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Valerie believes it is.
No, it is not. I say it's
okay.
not a Christmas movie.
I'd have to see it to really.
Oh yeah. Now that's something you have to watch this weekend.
I'm culturally deprived.
Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
That's tough. Nirvana.
Okay. My last question. Which character from The Breakfast Club can you relate to most?
Now you're gonna have to tell me what the Breakfast Club was.
Oh my gosh, Marco.
I know. I told you I'm culturally deprived.
So that was a movie in the 80s.
Yeah.
Maybe I saw. What was it? about?
Molly Ringwald, they all got detention together in the
It was a Gen X movie, but it was written
See,
by
I'm
a
a
bunch
boomer,
of
so
boomers.
what can I tell you?
It's very
yeah.
right? It's-
Okay,
Sorry.
we'll skip that one. We'll skip that. That's
Sorry to let you down. Yeah,
No.
make sure you edit that
Yes.
out.
And
Actually, keep it. It'll be fun.
last question: Southside Beehive or the Oakland Beehive?
Southside.
Yeah, that's what we all said. Scott Kramer is joining us here tonight, so maybe we'll open up another beehive, Scott. Yeah. Well, Marco, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
joining
guys.
us tonight. This
I'm
was
honored.
great. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate
Thank
taking
you.
the time.
Thanks to the audience
Really
for
enjoyed
even
it.
listening to all this.
Yes, and thanks guys for checking us out tonight. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great one. Hosts for the Gen X Pittsburgh Podcast are David Rullo and Valerie Christoffel. Executive producer, David Rullo. Producer and graphic design, Kimberly Rullo. Producer, Valerie Christoffel. Video production and editor, Brent Isaac. Music by Neostem. Sponsored by Potomac Station Coffee House and Con Alma.